So I would now like to open for some questions. And please stand up and speak loud and tell us to whom you are asking that question. Wakasha.
My question is for the man, the rabbi who spoke on the Buddhist topic.
Yehuda Gil.
Professor Yehuda.
Venerable Yehuda Gil.
Speak loud.
Well, firstly, I very much enjoyed your discussion, connected with Buddhism myself in the past. But my question is that you specified in your discussion that we can learn very much from the atheistic Buddhist. That we can learn to give up many of our egotistical inclinations and graspings. But my question is, well, firstly, I would say that I would agree that there's benefit. We shouldn't be, when we try to connect with God, we shouldn't be praying for, Benzes and Rolexes. But what's necessarily problematic with hoping for, for our ego to sort of benefit? Why should I not hope that those around me prosper, that I have spiritual well-being? What's problematic towards hoping that my ego is in fact in a better position to say now?
Thank you for the question. Ron, thank you. Thank you for the question. This is a large question, and it has to do with partly with what the words mean. There's nothing wrong with wanting people to prosper, and so therefore I would not want to include negating that in anything that I'm talking about, in negating egocentrism. Egocentrism here would be grasping for something which would be, let's put it this way. In the Buddhist conception, the source of all our suffering is our egocentric needs. We can let go of those. We can replace that with a sense of compassion, of love and goodness for ourselves and for others, which are not panicky or stressed or a source of suffering because we don't have them. It's that letting go of the monkey. So I agree with you. It's just that we have to elaborate more about what it means to be a grasping, what the Buddhists call attachment. But for sure, we would want to include what you're saying within a positive understanding. Okay, is that clear enough? But the rest you'll have to read about it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we continue, I just want to mention that if you want to order books, there is an order Oberans just gave to me. Secondly, also to the site, there are many many essays which I wrote. You can take them home, whatever you like, or in Hebrew or in English. Who has the second question?
David Krupman with the Center for Jewish Mission and Understanding and Cooperation, and proud co-sponsor with the event, and lending Eugene Korn in doing the book. So I just want to say thank you very much for doing an event like this. Secondly, I think it's for the panel, in essence, sort of why does Maimonides becomes the central point in all halachic decisions about how to relate to the other, where the Miri comes in as sort of like our loophole to even enter into the discussion, but Maimonides becomes the central figure. And like, what happened before Maimonides? Why are we so into having Maimonides as the central figure? And if you go into the discussions of the Gemara or even in the Bible, we see different things of allowing other groups to come in, or we relate to other groups through a biblical paradigm. Yet, for some reason, every single discussion you come out, the Rambam says it's Asar, the Rambam looks at the other religions in an idol worship way. I let anyone answer that.
Well, I take that question for a moment, and perhaps some other also would like to respond to that. This is a real dangerous but most important question which I've been dealing with for a long time. I'm going to say here some things which you should not tell to any of the other rabbis. And that is this.
Turn off the microphone.
Turn off the microphone. I believe personally that indeed when we look back, that the authority of Maimonides over the many years became too big and too powerful. The reason obviously are many, but one of them is that he was by far the most important thinker halachically and philosophically for the time. He stands out by far compared to any time. That cannot be denied. But it is true that the authority which he has halachically and the very fact that he therefore decided Jewish law and codified Jewish law, which then became more or less the standard, at least in the Shulchan Aruch, but even till this very day, has a dangerous dimension to it, no doubt. Somebody once wrote that, in fact, and I say this with the greatest amount of respect, as well as in his thinking, as well as halachic decision-making, Maimonides was in many ways a Greek thinker. He wanted to have everything in place. Everything had to be in order. Everything had to be in according to logic. And obviously you cannot really do that to the Jewish tradition, and you can definitely not do that to the Talmudic tradition. And I think that created lots of problems, and we still pay the price for that. What we need to do, but again I'm aware how dangerous these observations are, is to go back, look once more to the Jewish tradition from before Maimonides, and perhaps to reinterpret it, not outdoing him or ignoring him, and allowing him a very important voice, but not the final one, and definitely not the one which has now stated that this is it and there is nothing anymore to do because the Rambam said so. This is not a healthy condition, and that is not the way how we need to go. The very fact that the Meiri, as we mentioned before, and so many authors disagreed, Yehuda Levi and others have disagreed with him, is a marvelous thing, and we have to take that into account. And perhaps indeed we should take Maimonides down a little and to bring the Meiri up a little to continue the kind of Jewish life which today we in fact are in need of. And all of that is said with the greatest amount of respect, because nobody indeed is able to beat the man as far as philosophy is concerned, and his absolute clarity, which is really outstanding in the way he wrote down halacha. I once saw his Kitvei Yad, the very words which he wrote himself, I think in Oxford or in Cambridge in England. And the remarkable thing there was that when the professor who is the man in power over there showed me this, and you see Maimonides writing there, he nearly never made a mistake while he was writing. You see only once or twice a little thing crossed over and another word is replaced, is put instead of it. But there's a clarity there, there's an unbelievable product of intellectual and philosophical and also religious meaning, which is really absolutely powerful. Somebody once told me that if today somebody needs to write the Mishneh Torah, or we would try to write the Mishneh Torah, the Codex of Jewish Law, as clear and as precise as the Rambam did, you need 100 rabbis for 100 years to produce something like that. And I think there's a certain amount of truth in that. Still, I believe that indeed we need to think in different terms there, and perhaps be a little bit more flexible about the authority of Maimonides.
Not so fast. We, who like to be modernists and liberalists, run to the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim and in various places in Mishneh Torah. We are indebted to him for liberating us from views that, if it weren't for the Rambam, we would be stuck with. And therefore it behooves us to give the Rambam views on Avodah Zarah utmost seriousness. I don't accept it in my personal life, but I think that it's dafka us, we, who have to have the utmost respect for the Rambam, and we have to work through this. We have to work through this. I mean, we can't just say.
I'm not saying it's an issue of respect. It becomes the ultimate authority for everything else to flow. And in order to do what you're doing right now, even to have this discussion in a big Knesset, which is a huge thing to do, it's a mission statement, with the Rambam set in front of you, is a huge statement to say, okay, we're giving you the respect. But what happens is more often than not, I'm a product of the yeshiva education. I went to Moshe Feinstein's yeshiva. I know exactly how this would be perceived. I'm the black sheep of my yeshiva for even doing Jewish-Christian relations. I'm saying it's not the issue of respect, it becomes the ultimate authority of everything.
Yeah, I understand. It's not, I don't mean just respect. I absorb much of the Rambam's thinking about Elohim, for example, okay? So that I can't, at the same time, I have to be able to deal carefully with the Rambam's views on the Avodah Zarah. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
In other words, if there are lots of Jewish thinkers that I just dismiss, right, in terms of my own personal life. Yeah, this is not my Judaism, so okay. So that's why the Rambam looms so large for me. Not that I accept the Rambam's, personally I don't live the Rambam's sock about Christianity. But I'm saying this gives the stature to the seriousness in which it must be considered, because so much of the Rambam we absorb and we take that as the basis of our understanding. So I'm not saying that, I'm not disagreeing with your conclusion, but I'm a little bit more, want to be a bit more careful than my best friend.
I do disagree. Now with your conclusion with your premises. I don't think the Rambam's spirit looms as large. I think there's a danger in a sort of a systematic presentation. So you present one extreme, the other extreme, the third extreme, and that creates the impression that one extreme rules. I've read probably hundreds, certainly dozens of halachic discussions on issues of Christianity. And Eugene Korn, his essay argues that Rambam's position is not a majoritarian position. So his very thesis is Rambam isn't majoritarian. So many discussions of the Achronim proceed from the Ramah, and the Ramah proceeds from the Tosfos, and he proceeds from a whole other trajectory, and the whole discussion goes in a whole other way. People don't feel bound necessarily by the Rambam. Even Rabbi yourself, he proceeds along the questions. Yes, shituf, no shituf, how to do it. It's a very large trajectory. Therefore, I don't think the Rambam's spirit looms as large. Where the Rambam is important is not just because he's clear, it's not just because he integrates philosophy and halakha, because he's systematic. Because he's systematic, he offers the core definitions. And actually, I would say that the Rambam gives us some of the most important openings of how we approach other religions. To wit, the Rambam, first of all, he offers us a fascinating narrative that allows us to look at this unfolding of narrative of how Avodah Zarah came into the world and to ask, well, how do we situate ourselves? That's a fantastic text that's very rich, pliable. He offers us a definition of what Avodah Zarah is. Most people, even in the halachic normative, they're conditioned by a psychology of attitudes to other religions that is distinct from the halachic principles. From them, as soon as you use an image, it's Avodah Zarah. Rambam has a whole other attitude. It's the definition of what are you worshipping? Are you worshipping God or someone or something else? And if you take Rambam consistently, it actually becomes an important resource for working with the theology of other religions. And therefore, I buy neither into the dominance of Rambam nor into pigeonholing him as an obstacle. And therefore, I want to limit whatever I said about Rambam just to attempt to portray positions systematically, but it's far more promising, and in that sense also more important. Therefore, I don't think we need to put him up or put him down, we just need to put him in focus and to work with him. If it weren't for Rambam, a lot of people like me would be out of work. So let's show a little bit of respect to Parnassah here. Now the bottom line is that for Rambam, the ultimate issue is not Jew. Is not this or that type of religion. The ultimate issue is the truth. And I would simply recommend that you read some of the important studies by Menachem Kellner, who argues very systematically and coherently that for Rambam, the ethnic is not the issue, but the truth is the issue. One can agree or disagree, and I don't agree entirely with Menachem, but that's not the point. The point is he's got a consistent reading of Rambam. If, in fact, you follow Rambam, then you've got the following problem. If you're not dealing with the truth, then you're not worshiping God at all. And it doesn't matter, therefore, if you're Jew or non-Jew. And he goes so far as to say, in the Maimonides, in the God of the place, that a Jew who observes all the commandments, prays 3 times a day, but who thinks that God is corporeal, is worse than an Oved Avodah Zarah. He's worse than, I don't know what you want to call it, idolater, or whatever term you want to use for this. So therefore, the challenge that he's proposing is one that we all have to think about if we want to make any kinds of truth claims. But if we're going to make truth claims, then in fact, the same Rambam, in his introduction to the Shmona Parakim, to his 8 chapters on ethics, says, listen to the truth from whoever says it. In other words, the issue then becomes not whether you're Jew or anything else, but whether you're right or wrong. That is the ultimate issue for him, because the ultimate worship of God is the knowledge of God for him. And if you're worshiping anything else, then you're not worshiping at all. Now that's a structure that we may or may not want to live with, but it is certainly an intellectual challenge that can't be ignored. And so therefore I don't know that any one of us here, and this was not obviously planned, but I don't know that any one of us here would say that Rambam is the only authority. But Rambam is precisely presenting the challenge of what kind of religious person do you want to be? Is a religion a matter of voting for the right football team? This is my team, mine is the Jewish team? All right? Or is it really a matter that transcends any kind of ethnic identity and is a matter of the truth, and the truth can be found from any source? So therefore you find in Rambam statements that will support this view, but statements that will support that view. But in either case, whether you agree or ultimately disagree with him, you certainly can't ignore it.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you. This has been a very thought-provoking evening for me. It's the first time I've encountered this, and I don't know if I'm from the minority or everybody is familiar with this type of discussions. I have a general question, not sophisticated at all. From my perspective, it's a fundamental one, and I love everybody to try to say a word to my problems.
In who you are.
Who I am? I don't know if that's important.
Like a good Buddhist.
Pardon?
Spoken like a good Buddhist.
My name is Laura Korbanowitz. I'm a rabbi here in Yerushalayim. A dayan on the Beis Din in Yerushalayim. In a Karbach synagogue. Kol Rina. Thank you. The issue that I would like to just understand your perspective is as follows. I heard a lot about coexistence. I heard a lot about interfaith dialogue with other religions, understanding them, learning and trying to gain more identity, more understanding, more commitment, more connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it also seemed that everybody was comfortable with using our traditional sources, Gemara, Rishonim, for guiding ourselves. And I'm thinking the whole time, the lines of the Gemara in Avodah Zarah that talk about Shiny Avodah Zarah Damashki, there's a concern. Getting involved in other religions can be harmful, it can be dangerous. What about, how do we deal with that concern? Or other concerns of coming in with a different perspective? It seems that all of the panel was talking about, had the perspective of what can we gain in our religion and our personal lives. When you're dealing with these other people from other religions, what are their perspectives? What are their motivations? And if you're coming from 2 different directions, what happens when these two groups meet? So how about the harm that could come from this? And it's pretty fundamental to me on the beginner level of this kind of thing. I'd appreciate some comments on that.
Okay, thank you very much. This is indeed a very important question. Let me tell you from my personal experience, I used to have and still have quite often Baalei Teshuvah or Yeshiva, Bachorei Yeshiva, very often Haredi from Haredi Yeshivot coming to my Friday night table or coming to speak to me. And I always ask them, tell me something, how long have you been in yeshiva? So they tell me 4 years, 5 years, how many masechtot have you learned? I've learned so many masechtot. I said, well, so you are very well informed. Let me ask you one basic question. Imagine that a non-Jew or a non-religious Jew comes to you and asks you one simple question. And that question is, why are you religious? What would you answer? I can tell you that 99.9% of all these Bakurei Yeshiva I met did not know how to answer that question. That means to say there is something basically wrong in the system. That is because we never speak about these issues. God is not an issue in yeshiva. You're not allowed to mention him. There are today, Baruch Hashem, different yeshivot where are a little bit more open to this. But what I'm saying is this, what my personal opinion is that by learning about other religions, I think you can better understand the Jewish tradition. Because in many ways the Jewish tradition is also a response to the other religions. If it agrees or it disagrees, but I, for myself, from my own personal experience, I learned a lot from reading Spinoza, reading Kant, reading Hinduism, Buddhism, whatever it is. Because I suddenly say, hey, the midrash there or that Gemara now makes much more sense to me because it is responding to some of the other religious dimensions or religious beliefs, which I would never know about if I would not have that kind of background. So there is obviously always a danger to read about other religions, but should we not give that kind of Jewish education to our children that they are able to live with that? And by the way, it is not so bad always to sometimes to have doubts about Jewish tradition. There is nothing wrong about that. It sometimes deepens the question, and then on a deeper level you get a response. When you always look for certainty, it also paralyzes. And we have to try to make sure that that doesn't happen, because the moment you paralyze something, there's no continuation of the discussion anymore. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. What I worry about is that Jewish education, perhaps today better than it was in my days, is not responding enough to these challenges, and therefore people don't know what to do. And then these religions may indeed become dangerous.
Can I give a very quick response?
Sure.
Very quickly. Fred Summers, an outstanding professor of philosophy at Brandeis University, was very close to the Rav. When he wanted to study philosophy, he went to the Rav and he said, I don't know if I study philosophy because Rav Soloveitchik, Rav Joseph Soloveitchik, I know people study philosophy that become apikoursim. So the Rav said, study philosophy, planes crash and people fly. Fred Summers became an apikoursim.
Could you repeat the last part?
The last part was this plane crashed. His personal plane crashed.
He became an apikourist. He became an atheist. But he remained very close to the Rav, by the way. He was very close to the Rav until the Rav died.
So Baruch, you didn't ask a question, you expressed a worldview. And I want to break that worldview down into 3 questions, because you've got to deal with all 3 of them to make sense. One question is, how do we view the Gemara, and how does it operate as a source of authority? Second is, what room do we allow for contemporary winds of changes of time into our decision-making in education philosophy? The third, isn't it dangerous? And you've got to look at all 3 questions because they are a whole. In terms of the first question, there's the traditional way and there's the critical way. The traditional way is to say, nobody passes by the Gemara. We go by tradition. The Gemara is the foundation of tradition. That tradition goes on and has various expressions in later generations. And even if you find certain things in the Gemara, there's ample precedent in later generations, which itself includes part of the ongoing change of rabbinic tradition that provides you with precedent that you're allowed to engage in, and therefore it's beneficial, one thing and another. The critical answer, I won't leave here because I don't want to destroy the rhetoric effect of my answer, but it could detract from it, and I could pitch the argument also more critically, but let's answer it tradition. Second answer, which is the question, what's the room for admitting changes of time and concern and consideration, is a much broader philosophical question. Because that's the question that doesn't just touch on this issue. I think that was implied in Nathan's comment to you. It's a whole range of issues that determine whether you're going to educate to insularity, protection, defensiveness, or whether you attempt to present your Judaism in a way that maintains the capacity to say something, to be meaningful, and to what extent you even consider that Judaism's own evolution is interrelated to the world's evolution, and if society is opening up to certain possibilities, how does that change? What mandates does that give us for rediscovering things within our tradition? And for that matter, even quite possibly for preferring certain strata of tradition over the others. So it's a much broader philosophical answer, and therefore those people who across the board will take a different stance will take it also here. And those people who across the board will be more open, and so therefore it's part of, again, a broader issue. Then, related to that, and independently of that, is the question, is it potentially dangerous? Because that question, you don't need the Gemara for that. You just need common sense for that. And the answer is yes, it is potentially dangerous. And that's why I personally think that interreligious, you yourself should be very engaged in interreligious. Because for you it's not going to be dangerous, because you're learned, you understand, and you stand to benefit. You can bring it to your community. An uneducated member of the community who really can't speak for the tradition and doesn't know much should be encouraged maybe to cultivate healthy friendship, but not to become a deeply engaged spokesperson. You can't say that because we have uneducated members that our elites, the people who could think, shouldn't move forward in their thought. And therefore you need to modulate the type of activity to make it appropriate for people. When I gave the testimony of students who felt strengthened in their religious identity rather than weakened, those are already students with strong religious identity, and they stand to benefit. And therefore I'm grateful to you for posing this question, because it allows us to recognize that this whole range of engagement, collaboration, theology of religions has to be pitched to who is the right person doing it under what circumstances. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. It just means the right people should do it. And I'm glad that we've now got you in our ranks as of this evening.
We just have someone deal with the agenda that the other people, the other faiths have.
Yeah,
I haven't heard anything about that.
That's a fair question. That's really a fourth question. And the answer is, I'll let Rafi talk about it, because Rafi is a top dialogue with the Mormons, and they're very nasty missionaries. So he'll have to talk about how he handles their missionary thing and how he keeps that under control. But I'll tell you...
I quote Joseph Smith.
You quote Joseph Smith. But there are situations where part of the discernment, and this is true in business, it's true with salesmanship, it's true in anything, you've got to figure out what the motivation of the other guy. There is a huge cadre of people out there who have made huge strides in recognizing us as Jews, our validity to exist, the fact that our covenant has not been revoked, that we have the right to be who we are, we don't need to become something else. They're open to learning from us, they invite a spiritual mutual growth, and they open us up to the possibility for our own growth. There are others there who are also upholding a missionary ethos. In the non-discerning Orthodox world, the scepter of missionariness looms so large that people are incapable of making distinctions, and therefore everyone becomes a missionary. And that's a very, very false presentation. As a consequence, you're always on the defensive and you're always afraid. Are there people there who potentially can use dialogue as a seductive method for missionary purposes? This is a concern that many religions have. The Hindus have that concern in relationship to Christianity. In certain cases, that may even be applicable in relation to Jews, though much less so. It's a concern that you have to be savvy about and to be aware, and then you've got to decide on the spot whether to use the engagement as a way of winning them over, or whether you should avoid it. There's a certain practical wisdom that's involved. But then, so airplane flying also involves a practical wisdom of how not to crash into another airplane, not just crashing on your own.
I'm going to make two very quick statements because I know that Gila Rosen is anxious to look at the clock.
She can look at the clock without me.
Okay. Very quickly. First of all, I think that any group that thinks that it has a patent on the truth is arrogant and is cutting itself off from a lot of potential understanding, truth, wisdom, beauty, whatever you want to call it. Any group, and that includes ours. In the Middle Ages, even Rusht, known in the Latin tradition as Averroes, when he was asking the question, is it permitted forbidden or required to study philosophy, and came to the conclusion that, of course, it's obligatory to study philosophy, said that those who are afraid of studying philosophy because some people have been, well, in our terms, became apikovos, okay, is like a person who refuses to drink a cup of water because some people have drowned. Okay? And I would suggest that the same applies to any form of the truth, whether it's in this case philosophical, in this case religious truth. I don't believe that any group, including my own, has a lock and patent on the truth. We have a lot to learn from others, and we are depriving ourselves if we deny ourselves, and we are putting spiritual walls of a ghetto around us in place of the physical ones that others used to put around us. That's the first answer. And the second answer is that the radical Roman Catholic priest Hans Kühn has said, without peace among the religions, there won't be peace among the nations. If the human species could afford ignorance, hatred, suspicion, fear of the other, if that was ever possible before, in an era of weapons of mass destruction, in an era of the global village, we human beings simply cannot afford it anymore. Religions will either be a force for peace or they will continue to be a force for destruction in this world. And therefore, to quote that famous rabbi, Ben Franklin, we'll either hang together or we'll surely hang separately.
Thank you very much. Let me just say make one little observation. I think that what we are discussing here is the question to what extent did the Jewish tradition over the last 2,000 years become more and more defensive. And the time probably has come now, and I think that was expressed tonight, that we need not so much a defensive Yahadut, but we need now a prophetic one. One which moves forward because we are living in different conditions. The state of Israel has created totally radical changes in Jewish life. And that requires a lot of thinking, halachically, and also from a philosophical point of view.